Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business Spotlight, the podcast where we shine a light on the incredible entrepreneurs and business leaders in our community. I'm your host, Craig Whipperman with Music City Action Coach, and today we're excited to introduce to you someone who is blazing a trail in the field of book promotion and publishing right here in Nashville. Our guest today is Julie Schoerke, owner of Books Forward. We'll dive into Julie's background, explore the challenges she's faced, and the successes she's celebrated. Whether you're a fellow entrepreneur, an aspiring business owner, or simply someone who loves to support local businesses, this conversation is sure to inspire and inform. So without further ado, let's welcome Julie to the podcast. Julie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Craig. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so this should be fun. This is a kind of an interesting space you're in, one in which I don't have a lot of knowledge, but I feel like I've learned a lot just in chatting with you. But share with the community, what your business is.
So we started 25 years ago as a book publicity or book promotion company, and we were in the industry before it changed a lot in 2007, and then again in during COVID, it changed as well as when ebooks were introduced. So we've gone through several iterations, but it's been fascinating. We get to work with a lot of different authors. We've worked with over 1,000 authors. We've promoted over 1,300 books. And then we decided that we wanted to get into the book publishing when people would come to us with a manuscript. We really liked the author, we really liked the subject matter, but it needed to be edited. And there are 3 ways that you have to edit a book before it's published, or they didn't have the right book cover. So we went ahead almost as self-defense to do the promotion that we started the book publishing, and we require that the book go through the same rigorous plan as any book that Random House is going to put out, or Penguin. And so the author has to be willing to have us tell them if it's to industry standards or not. But that's only fair to our authors who are traditionally published, because we want our books that are with our hybrid published authors, that's what we call them. We want all sets of books to look like they belong on the same bookshelf together.
Yeah, awesome. And so 25 years of doing this, 1,000 books over that period of time.
1,300 books and 1,000 authors.
Sorry, 1,000 authors. That's a lot. How many books do you publish and promote in a year?
We publish about 20 books a year, and we promote those. And then we are promoting around 60 books at a time, but we've got this amazing team. I realized we tried early on hiring people who were already book publicists, but that did not work at all. None of them made it. Our book publicists that have made it are ones that were in journalism, and so they already knew across the desk what somebody wanted. And then we were able to teach them how to do book publicity. And one of the differences between us and other companies is that if we promise we're going to do something, then we really do it. And it's the same thing with journalists. If a journalist has an editor that says, I want 1,500 words to go on the front page of the newspaper, you can't come back and say, I have no story. And it's the same thing with what we do. I'm a former journalist. Our president, Marissa DeQueer, is a former journalist, and the people that work with us. And so we prefer to train them. And it works well because in our industry, in the book publicity industry, there's a 70% 70.
I was going to say failure rate, 70%.
Oh, yeah. Well, 70% turnover. Yes, employee turnover a year.
Gotcha.
And every year. And the person who has been with us the shortest length of time has been 7 years.
Oh, wow.
So we really try to treat our employees well in the way that we would want to be treated, and we consider it a team. The name of the company started out as JKS Communications, which was my initials, and I just needed a name for the IRS the first year. But then I really felt uncomfortable because there are so many great people that I work with. And I thought it doesn't really make sense that it's just under my name. It really should be, everybody should be recognized. So that's why we changed it to Books Forward and Books Fluent.
Awesome. So that is pretty impressive. Average turnover annually, 70% in the industry, and the shortest tenure you've got is 7 years.
Yes.
Well, that's something to be proud of. You guys are doing something right. What would you say that you're doing differently?
Um, well, before COVID, we try to make it very democratic. And before COVID, we from the very beginning allowed people to decide whether they wanted to have an office, whether the team wanted an office or offices as we grew, or if they wanted to work remotely. And that was, my father was an entrepreneur and he did that in the 70s before anybody else did it. And weirdly, our team always chose to have an office. And so that's the kind of thing that we try to do. We try to make it so that it's as pleasant for everybody as possible. And then we work very hard to share the profits with everybody.
Mhm.
That's really important to me, that everybody feel appreciated that way. And then we also will work with people. We had one team member who, her grandfather was dying. And so she moved to Denver with him to be with him for the 6 weeks before he died. And then she had 4 weeks beyond that with him. And she could work when she wanted to, and she didn't have to work when she didn't. And we're really flexible about that. If people will take time off, we really like it because I feel like they rejuvenate when they get away for a little while. And we have several team members that don't ever want to leave. And so sometimes we force them. And earlier this year, we we bought a plane ticket and an Airbnb certificate to one of the employees who would never leave, forcing her to go.
And did she thank you for it when she returned? Did she take you
Well,
up
she
on it,
thanked
or?
me for it before, and I think that she enjoyed it, but it made her nervous. And which I think is funny because we say, there are other people that can work, there are plenty of people in the firm that can work. And our clients, we want our clients to feel like it's a family, and we want our employees to feel like it's family, because we're not that big. And it's so the clients are happy to talk with the other team members if somebody's out or whatever. And so that's really, really important to us. And it's also really important to us that we train well and there's really good communication. And frankly, I'm not a great communicator when it comes to that. And so I just, when I worked for other people, they hired me and I just wanted to do the job. And then they would come and they'd stand over me and I thought, you hired me. So then when I started hiring people, then they would come and ask me questions and I'd say, well, we hired you, just go do it. And so Marissa, who is the president,
Yeah,
she trains people, and we have two other people that have come up through the ranks and been with us over 10 years. And so they train also, and they're just much better at it.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome. So you guys have figured out how many people are employed? How many on the team?
We have 12 people that are full-time and 8 people that are contractors.
Okay. So that's a manageable number of folks to, encourage engagement and sharing ownership. That's kind of a big deal. I think that makes a huge difference because s- it's a testament to the people who are loyal to you, I think. Sometimes you get folks who are like, 9 to 5ers, they clock in, they clock out. Uh, but if they own a piece of it, they feel like, that their investment of their time will pay off, in some way or shape or fashion in the long run. And so I think providing ownership is a very great motivator for employees, but you got to find the right people, that you can engage. And it sounds like you guys have.
Well, and I read this book and I thought I would bring it since I'm a book
Oh
publicist.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Good to Great. And I read this probably 20 years ago, but
Right.
it made all the difference in the world. It has such good information in it. And the one thing that we work on every single day is the right person in the right seat to for us to drive the bus forward. And we had one person that we absolutely adored, but we didn't have her in the right seat for 3 seats. Now we've had her in the right seat for 6 or 7 years, and she is amazing, and we literally could not replace her.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Good for you. Good for you to work on your side of it to find the right seat for her. And obviously, hats off to her for taking the feedback and being able to find something. I bet she's flourishing now, right? She loves it, and you guys love what she's doing.
She is key to our business, yes.
I think too many employers maybe don't take the time to do that and end up, putting people on a correction plan and then just marching them out. And all along, they knew they were ready to let them go even before they put pen to paper to put down a plan. Um,
Yes.
and
Yes,
that's
that's very
it's
true.
very, very costly to let someone go because then you got to bring someone else in to train them up. It's like, hiring the right people is so important.
And
Uh,
we think about that also. We think often about, or earlier on, now it's just part of our culture, but we thought it's costs about 30% of a person's salary to bring them on before they are able to produce enough to pay for themselves even.
Right. So there's an investment up front and a risk associated with that. So in your early days, but before you guys got into the publishing piece of it, you found that authors were bringing works to you that actually needed another edit or two, right?
Yes, they actually, almost all of them needed 3 edits, one being a developmental edit. And even Ann Patchett in Nashville, New York Times bestseller over and over again, she talks about she still has a developmental editor that will read her book and say, chapter 3 really ought to be chapter 1, and let's move a couple of these things around. And that's it's a collaborative experience,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
some authors can do it, some authors can't do it. But if you do it, the book does turn out to be better because you're so close to it that it's really difficult to see. And the important thing about a book editor, other editors will change your work. A good book editor will never change your work themselves. They only give you notes, and then you choose if you want to make those changes, and you do it in your own words, because otherwise you've got a couple of voices going on in the book. Now, when we get down to line editing, where is the comma in the right place? Are there any misspellings? Then that editor does change, but they don't change the way that an author writes at all, ever. And there are lots of book editors that do that, and that drives me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. They're operating beyond their scope, I guess, right?
Yes.
Well, I find it interesting that you saw the need for public. Apparently, there were a bunch of publishers out there who were not doing a good job, and I guess your authors going to them for a service that they weren't really providing. You guys kind of saw a need there. Actually, not as much a need for yourself as it is a need satisfying your client, right? Because it just makes it harder for you to publish a book that you see some potential there, but um, it just can't, it won't work without at least some peer review, I guess, right?
Absolutely, yes. And for us to promote a book, we couldn't do it if, you know, if there was a book very early on, 24 years ago, we got a book and I really liked the guy and I really liked the topic. I thought it was fascinating. I've never read another book like that. And but it needed to be edited, and he refused to edit it. We went ahead and promoted it. We even bought out a whole month on NPR in Washington, D.C., well, for their national programs, and promoted the book there. And it just didn't sell because it was not edited properly. And that's when I said, we just can't do that anymore. And then the other thing is that there are fewer publishers now since 2007. A lot of them have joined forces. There are fewer books that the publishers are willing to take a chance on. They tend to want to publish the same author over and over and over again that has made money. That's why when you go to the airport, you see the same names over and over again. And so the traditional publishers allow you, if they buy your manuscript, and they used to buy it for maybe $250,000, and now they might buy it for 10,000. So they're not taking as big a chance. And so once they do that, then you have to promote the book. And that's what's changed since 2007, because they used to say, okay, you can have a 3-book deal and we'll kind of develop you. Well, they don't do that now. You get 6 weeks with your in-house publicist. They're working on a bunch of other books, and you have to, you've got to get your book out there within 6 weeks, because if it goes into a bookstore, bookstores are completely different than all other retail, because they don't buy the book. They bring the book in for 6 weeks, and then they can return it. And so they return it if it hasn't sold. So you have to get those books pulled through. And so that's why our business really took off. And since then, there have been people that have gotten in the business that don't completely understand that. You have to, when you know this, somebody has to see something 7 times before they're going to buy into it.
Right.
And so there are some book publicity companies that say, we will get you on 6 blogs for, reader blogs. Well, that doesn't do anything, because then the people never see the book again. I mean, it might move a couple of books, but we want to be able to say, we've got you on TV, we've got you on the radio, we've got you on podcasts, we've got you in print, we've got you on special lists, special reading lists in magazines, that sort of thing. Because then your book title keeps coming up over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you guys are helping authors, I guess, in that 6 week period to really push. Is that right? It's like you're pedal to the metal during that time, and then
well,
take
a
it
lot
through a
of books
second.
now are sold on Amazon, of
Right.
course, and so we have to bring that into the equation. We start working with authors 4 months before the book comes out, because we need to, it's again very collaborative. We pull together the information that we need, and we read the author's book. We look at the comps of other books that are in the same industry, although at this point we pretty much know, because we do this all the time. And so we are familiar with what's in the genres. And then we have to, like, people say, well, you write a press release. Well, a press release won't do anything anymore, because a lot of people miss their emails, and there are so many emails that come into journalists that you've got to make it really personal. And an individual could do this for themselves, but you have to research the journalist and figure out, why would this journalist care about this story? And then you pitch it to them that way, and then you can give them the press release, the headshot. We had an author that was half Chinese, half Japanese, and his book was about a boy who was Chinese in New York, and it was a young adult book, and we sent information out to a whole bunch of media. But the media that made the most difference was, we contacted somebody in sports who was from China. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was Chinese and Chinese American. And he happened to be sitting on the board for the biggest book festival in the entire world, that has more than 1 million people that go to it, in China. And he got him on that stage. And so, would you ever have sent a book about a teen murder to somebody in sports? Well, no, not normally. But, and also people can do this for themselves. They just have to think out of the box.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, you guys are like a machine, though, right? You're doing this. How many times? How many books did you say you do a year? 40? Is that right?
Well, we do 60 at a time, so about 120 a year.
120 a year, which is a lot of books. And so
Because it
you're
ends up, yeah, I'm sorry. We start 4 months ahead, and then, I'm sorry, I didn't finish answering your question. Then we go through the 6 weeks, and we make a hard push then, but you if you make it in 6 weeks and you sell a lot of copies, well, then you want to keep selling them. So you keep
Mhm.
going on, and we stay with the authors 2 months past their release date. And also we try to be really supportive. It's a lonely business to write a book, and then it's really lonely, especially for introverts, to feel like they have to go out and promote it. So we very much try to bring them in as a family, as I mentioned. And I think that every one of our publicists has cried with an author at one point or another.
Wow. Wow. That's a pretty close relationship then, huh? That's fascinating. So how did you get into this line of work? You started out as a journalist, you were working for another uh, a company, some media company maybe, and decided I need to go out on my own. Is that how that happened?
No, I started out in not-for-profit for several years doing PR for not-for-profits. And then I stayed home to have my kids. And then I decided that I would go back in and work a little bit. So I started writing for the newspaper, the Tennessean, and I had a column. But one time, my editor said that I had to write a column about this house that a whole bunch of bad things had happened in. And four
Hmm.
men who had lived in that house all went to prison. I mean, four in a row who bought the house. And I didn't want to write that story because their families were still out there. And so I told him, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm not a real journalist because I only want to write happy stories. And so then I decided to go into doing the book publicity. And I early on I did a couple of other types of publicity, which kind of helped me to figure out how to be more creative. Because for example, in New York, people who do publicity, they're myopic and they just think about a book, and that's understandable. That's all they ever hear. But we early on had a Nashville author that I just adore. She's moved to Chattanooga now, but she's got great books. And her first book her name's Susan Gray Gilmore, and her first book was called Looking for Salvation at the Dairy Queen. Well, um, what's the first way that you would promote a book with Dairy Queen? But um, but no one had ever done that in Random House. And they said, well, we don't know if that would work. And I said, well, let me call them up and ask. And I called their home headquarters. There had been 6 books in 7 years prior to this that had the name Dairy Queen in it, and nobody had ever contacted them before. Well, they jumped on board and did a national campaign with us.
That's awesome. And so needless to say, it was a success.
Oh, yeah, but it was also a really good book. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. So you got into the business of publicity, and that was the wheelhouse for how long was it that you were just doing publicity before you realized you had to get into publishing?
Let's see. I think we started the publishing 8 years ago, so that would be 17 years.
Oh, wow. So you had a long run just doing publicity.
Yeah, because we would try when we would get authors that had messed up manuscripts, or their book cover didn't work, or their typesetting was off, then we would give them recommendations of who they could go to, and contractors could help them. But
Hmm.
we didn't have any control over how quickly the contractors did it or how well. So we decided, all right, let's bring it all in. So
Yeah.
put it in-house.
Yeah. And so it all worked out.
Yeah. And of
So,
course, we have Ingram in Nashville, and so that's where we publish through them.
oh, wow. Fantastic. So 25 years, you guys are up and humming now. Things have changed in 25 years. You know, Amazon was pretty small in 2000, but kind of had a bright future. And
Yes.
now they're, a mammoth gorilla that pretty much controls a lot of things beyond, book distribution. But what's the tell us some high points. What are some high points and what are some low points? Start off with the high points in the history of your business.
Oh, okay. I would say some high points are, people will ask us, what are the books that you're the most proud? What's the book that you're the most proud of? And they always think it's going to be one of our New York Times bestsellers. And we love it when we have USA Today bestsellers and New York Times bestsellers and Wall Street Journal bestsellers. But what really makes our hearts sing is when we get a book, and they're usually books for teenagers that will that a librarian will bring the book in and then will be able to tell us about a changed life because of it, that something has really motivated that person, and our authors will hear from them. We also have authors that write business books, and that's done well, of course, too. We represented Carl Mecklenburg with the Denver Broncos from years ago, and he had been successful in speaking, but then he kind of he hadn't been around a lot, so he wanted to go ahead and start speaking again. And the plank in his platform was a book, which is often the case, that a business person gets a book, and then that gives them all kinds of opportunities for media and to be able to be brought in as a speaker and that sort of thing. So he wrote the book, but mainly he did it so that we could get him media. And he was so excited and called us, and it went to a second printing. And a lot of books never go to a second printing. And he said, "Can you believe it?" I said, "Well, then your book mattered."
Yeah, right. Yeah. So those are the high points, is when
yeah. So that was a high point. And then when we a low point is when we feel like, when we get a book and we think that we're going to be able to do something with it, and then something out of our control happens, and we can't make it go. And we're then very honest with whoever the author is, and we'll say, "Let's stop the campaign now. Don't pay any more money." And one example was two guys who had written a really in-depth, very good book on Abu Ghraib. I'm probably not saying that right. But Americans did not want to hear about it. And it was too bad, because they were really, really good. But we stopped the campaign. And then we've had other authors that we've stopped the campaign because they went with other hybrid publishers, and the publishers didn't get the pricing right. They charged the people a bunch of money. So the author would never be able to make their money back. Like, we had one author that actually lost $1 every time she sold a book, not including paying us. And she was really mad when I said we couldn't represent her anymore. But she didn't understand finances. She didn't understand that she was losing money. And so that was those have been challenging things. But when the economy goes down, our business tends to go up. When something bad happens in the economy or in the world, for example, with COVID, people remember early on with COVID, how you wouldn't go out and buy things, and then you'd also buy things and you'd leave them on the porch for 24 hours before you brought it in, because you didn't know what was in the box. So that's when a lot of people started reading ebooks that hadn't before. So that really helped our business. And then also a lot of authors started writing books because they finally had time. They were at home and had time. And so there were more books that were published, and then there were many more books that were read. And I have some funny statistics about that. But when in 2007, when the economy went down, and the housing market, the stock market, everything, well, that's when publishing went down, but that's also when the published authors had to have somebody help them, or else they wouldn't get their next book deal, because again, they had to sell enough books on their own. So we've been really, really lucky in that way. But there are some crazy statistics about books, for example, and I don't know that this is true since COVID, but I once saw that 80% of all adults in the United States want to write a book, but only 50% have read a book in the last 2 years. Those are the people that we don't take. We don't take their manuscripts, because they don't know how to write a book if they aren't reading them. And then another is that there are more than 3 million books a year published in the United States. And so that's more than 4,000 every single day on average. And That's part of the reason that hybrid has taken off. As people buy books on Amazon, it's very difficult to tell whether it's a traditionally published book, a hybrid book, or a self-published book. There are three different kinds. And there are so many different publishing houses now that it's that spread across that you might think that you're reading a small publishing house's book, but it might be a hybrid book, or you might pick up a self-published book and you're going to put it down pretty fast.
Yeah.
So,
So 3 million books published a year. I'm sure that dwarfs numbers from 10, 15, 20 years ago, doesn't it?
oh yeah, it used to be when traditional publishing controlled everything, and when they could release books when they wanted to, which is a whole nother subject, but there might be, I don't know, maybe at the most 100,000 at the most. But back in, when you think about 25, 30 years ago, when I'd get on a plane, you'd see 5 people reading the same book. Everybody's reading Michael Crichton's book or whatever. And now you don't see that as much. There are books that are popular, but there are so many more books. And people will ask me, have you read this book or that book? But I can't read every book, obviously. And there are books on the New York Times bestseller list that don't appeal to me, so I don't read them. But I'll tell them, but I've read a lot of books that you probably won't read or you don't know about that I've been able to find out about through my industry.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fascinating. You said at some time ago, maybe 100,000 books published a year.
Yeah, I'm guessing it might have just been 50,000, but at the most 100,000.
Well, and the ease with which now you can get a book, right? I used to have to go into Barnes and Noble or some bookstore and look around and see what was interesting to me because it didn't have things, slapping me in the face all the time. Now you sit in front of your desktop and you get communicated to by any means, any medium about some good book. You go look a review at it, hit the topic, oh, that looks interesting. I think I'll buy it. One click and it shows up tomorrow.
Exactly.
That has to have driven demand for books. There's no question because I buy books. I don't know. I hear lately I probably read a lot more than what I have in the past, but I know I've bought books that have sat on my shelf, that I haven't even cracked the cover on. But it is so much easier to get books now, which is a great thing, so that people can, 50% of the population have read a book in the last 2 years. We've as a society, hopefully can up that number because, and of course, you want them to be reading the right things, not the latest post by your friend on Facebook that is designed to, entice you, not entice you, but inflame you, I guess. But reading is a good thing. And I just think it's a fascinating thing to consider how easy it is now to get a book and what that has done to drive demand for books, and like you say, spread it out amongst all people who are writing books. Right? It's not one publisher deciding one author needs to be promoting all of this book. It's many, 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 many different publishers, and it's same. You can say the same for music. How
Yes,
you know
yes.
there is so much more. It's easier to listen to whatever it is you want to listen to, and it's easier for a no name to come out of nowhere and get popular, which is just kind of I don't know, it's kind of fascinating economics, really.
I
Um,
kind of forgot about that, but you're right. We were almost exactly 6 years behind the big change in music, and it's followed the same course. You're right. And then
mhm.
the 50% that read books, they may read them voraciously. So then
Yeah,
they're the ones who, like you, a voracious reader, then it's not like you read one book in the last 2 years. Yeah.
right, right. Well, so what's the plans for your company going forward?
Oh, well, I'd like to see us move more in the direction of I'd like for us to publish more books, and I think that we'll be able to do that. I had a mentor years ago that started out with a little company and he sold it for $1 billion. And so I said, "What can you tell me? What's the one thing that you would tell me to do?" And he said, "People around you are going to tell you to grow, and your answer is no. You have to grow at a speed that is manageable." And so that's what we've done. We've figured out how is the best way to publish. And so I'd like to see us do more of that. And then we also would like to work with more business books to be able to send people out to speak. We're not a speakers bureau, but if you have a fiction book, or if you have, well, I guess you could with a cookbook, but a fiction book, a children's book, a young adult book, a mystery, you're not going to be able to get those people in front of an audience that easily. But a business book, you learn something. And so that makes it possible. And that's one of our favorite sections of our book publicity business, is to be able to get people out. And a lot of authors will say, I would like for you to bring us into a bookstore. And that's another way that we have changed, and we continue to change more and more. And that is that we rarely put anybody in a bookstore anywhere except in the town that they live, unless bookstores want you to be able to promise that you'll bring 20 people in. The author themselves have to bring 20 people in to the event. And that's not always possible, because the authors think that the bookstores will bring them in. Bookstores, Parnassus, it's awesome. They have all kinds of book events all the time in Nashville, but they bring in people that they know their audience is going to want to see. And they build up their business so that now they get lots of famous authors. And so what we would rather do, and what we work on, is, rather than pulling an audience in, we want to take a speaker to where there's already an audience. That makes a huge difference. And another way that we will expand, well, I don't know if I'd say expand, but mature or grow, is that the digital marketing is huge, and it continues to change and morph all the time. And so we'll continue to do that, because we have a really active department that works on that. And you see, it's hard to tell somebody up front what the return on investment is going to be and how many books they're going to sell, because traditional publishers wouldn't publish so many books if they knew exactly what was going to sell. So we can say that we're going to do something, but we can't guarantee that then these capricious readers are going to read the book. But doing the digital marketing, kind of what you were talking about on the computer, then that has a much better ROI. That somebody can get their arms around, so an author can understand better how it's helping them. And you made a good point, also a great point, that people spend so much time on their phones and computers now, on social media. So sometimes authors will feel like they're in competition with other authors, and that's not the case. Their competition is social media and their phone. That's changed the whole game.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. That's what's it's unfortunate. The devices have all been designed to get you hooked and pick up your phone and start scrolling. One good thing is now, Audible is a great way to consume books and information. So that wasn't available before, but
and that's grown a lot. That's the biggest sector that's growing, and it's brought a lot more male readers in. I mean, by leaps and bounds, more male readers or book consumers. Audiobooks has made all the difference.
Yeah, no question. What I'll do now is listen to I have a subscription to Audible, and I'll just listen to books. And if I'm like, oh, wow, that's a great book, then I'll go buy the book, and sit there and read the book and highlight, and make notes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, then you can just, use Audible to kind of screen through the ones that are that you like, But it's $15 a month. That's not bad at all. It's the price of one book if you're lucky,
Exactly.
But so controlled growth is what you want to do. You don't want to what is it? You don't want to get out over your skis, I guess. Controlled growth, and you're looking to focus more on digital marketing for that growth, and then looking for opportunities to take authors to where an audience already is, rather than having to bring the audience or expect him to have the audience to promote the book.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Julie, it's been great talking to you. Tell me, before we leave, you mentioned and you showed Good to Great, which is a great book, by the way. It came out, at the same time I started with a company that had just gone public, and we kind of used that as a roadmap for, growing the company. And, we went on to some pretty good success, but I love that book. And so you mentioned that one. What book, maybe beside that one, or you can mention that one, has kind of served as a cornerstone for you, or is there one recently? And now it's really funny because I asked this question of people who don't read, tons and tons of books like you do. So I'm really curious to hear your answer.
Well, I've been lucky that I'm not working as hard as I used to or as many hours, and so I've gotten to read more books that I want to and that interest me. Because I never had time to pick up a random book before. And the book that I'm really into right now is The Fourth Turning, and then there's just been published a sequel to it, but it is fascinating. It's a pretty dense book, but it's about how cultures through history, through thousands of years, and also throughout the whole world have these measurements of 20 to 30 years where the culture is doing really well, and then they're kind of skating along, and then it starts to fall off, and then something horrible happens, and then it starts again. And then it's interesting to look at when someone's born into each one, how they end up relating to the world and what they contribute to the world. It's a great book, and it's
Yeah.
audio and physical.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So, what that reminds me of? Uh, do you know or have heard the name Ray Dalio?
Yeah, but tell
Yes.
me.
Yeah, I think it came out in like 2020. I think it came out in the middle of the pandemic. The Changing World Order. Have you read that?
Yes.
That book reminds me, or how you had described it reminds me of his. Of course, he's not so much on the social. The foundation of the book is his experience economically, as a hedge fund manager, betting on economies and, whatever part of the world. And it's overlaid on what he has brought into the picture, kind of the social impact and the socioeconomic. And he combines the two, and he comes up and he describes these list of determinants that he uses to measure where a country and an economy is on the cycle that you just kind of described. So it's not only the culture wars, but then there's the debt credit cycle that he superimposes on it. It's a fascinating book.
Fascinating. Yes.
It's a
Yes.
it's a great book. Well, I'll have to pick up The Fourth Turning and check that out because
It, it's worth it.
I get interested in kind of economics types of things, and topics. And this one isn't, like I said, probably not too much economics in it, but a lot of social type description of.
Well, there's a fair amount of economics because it does drive socially what happens. So, for example, World War II, there was the Depression, then there was World War II, then that economics helped to bring in the 1950s, which was a growth period in the United States. So the economy does add into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I will definitely have to pick it up. So I love the recommendation. That's the best one so far.
Thank you.
And it's been great having you as a guest, Julie. I'm so happy to have spent time with you, and I do wish Books Forward a lot of success in the coming years.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Craig, for having me on. I really love to watch your podcasts.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Well, I'm looking forward to watching this one. You have a good day.
You too.